All right, we're live.
Hello.
We're back to normal
We are back to normal, dude. It's been nice.
for the first time in like a month. It seems like.
Yeah. Yeah, I was traveling the globe, but now we're back.
Yeah, we're definitely gonna talk about that. I think we're gonna have some time between guests. We're gonna talk about your travels, what you learned, what you did.
Definitely.
But
We had some streams while I was gone.
yeah, you did. Yeah, we kept it going, but it didn't feel like home. This feels
It
like
wasn't
home.
the original show.
Yeah, we are back. So thanks for everyone for tuning in. This is AI Agents Hour. I'm Shane. This is Abby. And yeah, we're basically back. It'll be even, I'll be in San Francisco this week, so I don't know if we're gonna have a live stream in person or not, but we're gonna try. We'll see. But we do have some AI news today. We have Leonard from Hayes Labs coming in. We're gonna talk about multi-agent systems. Should you do it? Should you not? What are the pros and cons? What are some of the other players? What are they saying about multi-agent systems? We're gonna have Security Corner with Allie. And then we're going to talk just some Mastra updates and even have a guest from the Mastra community come in and just show a demo of what was built. So pretty cool show today.
Yeah, I'm stoked. They haven't done news. Well, I hadn't done any news in a while, so it was purely just pair programming on stream. So this is gonna be dope.
Yeah, we got a lot, and there's a lot to cover. I think the first thing that would be interesting to talk about, this is kind of a wild card. I just saw a tweet about it, but there is for those of you that didn't hear about this, there's AI Startup School, which is going on right now.
Yep.
It's YC is hosting it. And it seems like they had Sam Altman today as a speaker, and two things got announced that I thought was pretty cool. So the first thing was that ChatGPT is supposed to have MCP support. I think it's supposed to happen today or very soon. So that's pretty cool. And also they mentioned that and I think they've, teased at this a bit, but OpenAI, I think I don't know if this is the first time it's officially been confirmed or if it's just, more news on when it's going to actually happen, but they're going to release an open source model. So
nice.
In the time frame that I heard from someone, again, I wasn't watching, I wasn't there, but been seeing what was popping up about it on Twitter, on X. It sounds like maybe this month, or maybe within a month. So relatively soon. We'll see. Maybe it was all, maybe it's all fake news, but we will find out soon enough. But two kind of cool updates, I think, from coming out maybe from OpenAI.
Yeah, and it's interesting they did it at the startup school. There's so many people there. If you look at the images that they're posting online.
Yeah, I thought it'd be big, but damn.
The production value is crazy.
Yeah.
Too. It's better than our demo day at YC.
I know. I feel like we got screwed a little bit, but no. It's really cool to see a lot of interest. Obviously, a lot of people, younger crowd, I think, as well, that got invited to this. So it's really cool to see, all the college students and high school kids or whatever, all ages, I imagine, a lot of interest in AI, right? And I think, if you're watching this, you're probably pretty interested in AI too.
Yeah, definitely. It was an application process for it, so not everyone got to go. So I'm sure there's some wild builders out there or soon to be builders. So, and they are very impressionable. So YC does their impressions. So it's a perfect place to do it.
Yeah, YC wants to get the next generation of builders to apply. So I'm sure it is going to it's going to work in getting more applications in.
And people are coming from all over the world. When I was in Japan, I met a couple of people who got into YC Startup School. So I'm sure they're there right now, just enjoying it and taking it all in.
Yeah. And so, they even cover airfare they're sparing no expense. So 2,500 top CS undergrads, masters, and PhD candidates, 100% free. Every attendee is handpicked. So obviously you see that Sam Altman was talking today. A lot of, really high profile speakers. They're getting they're getting the big names in there for sure.
Man, I can't believe Elon's going.
Yeah. I just have this feeling Elon and Sam aren't speaking on the same day.
No,
Elon's got to be tomorrow, right?
gotta be. I would love to see them speak at the same time.
All right, so yeah, that is a kind of news item number one. So a couple other things that we'll just maybe talk through before we look at some stuff. But it's been since last week since we talked about some AI news. So Meta is acquiring a 49% stake in Scale AI. So rather than actually just try to buy them, they're just buying a minority of the company, I guess, 49%. And then, Scale's CEO is going to be a Meta executive on, kind of a new super intelligence team, or they're trying to build a new super intelligence team using some of Scale AI to do it. So that's a pretty big acquisition, or I guess
Huge.
I don't know if it's technically counted as an investment, not an acquisition, because they're just buying, investing in or buying a portion of the company.
Yeah, but some employees will get some payout essentially for the exchange of stock.
Yeah, which is good. It's an interesting way too, because it wasn't like a normal acquisition. So I wonder if more companies are going to try to do this to skirt around, some regulatory issues that may come up sometimes when these big companies try to acquire, other companies, right?
Yeah, like for at least the funny part here is Meta, even if they acquired Scale, it wouldn't be a monopoly because they fucking suck at AI. So they needed this one.
Yeah, they needed. They're trying not to,
Yeah.
I mean, and I still I want Llama to be good. I just do, right? I want there to be good open source models for people to use that are somewhat competitive with, some of the bigger players. So I'm rooting for, for the open source models to win.
Yeah.
And maybe that's a good segue into this next one here. So Mistral has announced Magistral. So it's the first reasoning model by Mistral AI. And so Magistral Small, which is like their smaller reasoning model, is open source from what I've seen. So that's cool. Another open source. I do think that, from what I've read, I don't know if it's that good compared to other reasoning models, but I think it's the idea that it's coming from kind of the EU. It is open source. So I guess that makes it, kind of interesting.
Yeah, I was talking to a AI coding agent founder, and they had a business opportunity like we all do, where a big enterprise comes in and says, hey, if you build this example or do this feature, we'll pretend to be interested in paying you. And but you couldn't use any closed source model. So he was trying to do any number of things. Llama was not very good. And he did try Magistral, and it was not very good. So unfortunate. But there are other models out there that may be better, or this one will get better over time.
Yeah. What about DeepSeek? Did they try DeepSeek?
They tried DeepSeek, but then it was not allowed for some reasons.
Yeah.
So it's
I figured.
unfortunate. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, on the one hand, I do like seeing more open source models, so that's good.
Yeah.
It's nice to have, and again, they do post some benchmarks on where it sits. Of course, these benchmarks, they're going to always pick the ones. There's tons of benchmarks out there, right? They're going to pick the ones where they do pretty well.
Yeah.
You can see it's in some cases underperforming DeepSeek, but in some cases it's close or overperforming. So that they're choosing DeepSeek as the other competitor, since that's kind of the bigger, reasoning model that's open source. But yeah, always in favor of seeing more open source models. It's more competition is better for all of us, right? Better models means we can build better things.
And if OpenAI puts their open source model, that'll only inspire. Now you have something to look at to then improve yours and see how it goes. So maybe we're on the cusp of open source model federation, where everyone just starts open sourcing models like Anthropic and everyone else. That'd be great.
Yeah. All right. And yeah, so another thing just another news item. This it's kind of partially announced last week, so some of this is probably review for some of you. You maybe already heard this, but O3 Pro is now in both Pro and Team plans of OpenAI, and there's also like an 80% price cut for O3, so that's cool. If you hadn't heard that, getting cheaper is a good is definitely a good thing. We do have a comment here from probably before when we were talking about Meta. Zuck's trying to not be bad at AI. Yes, agreed.
They're trying a lot of things.
They're trying. They are definitely trying.
There's 58 of you in here, so thanks for joining us.
Yeah, so and this is live. So if you're watching this right now, you're probably watching on X or YouTube or LinkedIn. You can just post a comment. We can see them. Yeah. We'll respond to some of them if we, depending on what we're talking about, we'll try to get you on. And yeah, it's interactive. So feel free to let us know what you're thinking. Let us know if we're missing anything. What else? What's the most exciting thing you're seeing for AI news? And all right, so another one. This one is, everyone always has probably seen the VO3, all the AI generated videos that have been coming out. Well, there's a new,
so many now.
Yeah, so many. There's a new model in town, and it is by ByteDance. So this is TikTok's parent company. It's called Seed Dance. So you can see it's a new video model. I have not tried it. I just started to read about it a little bit. I have tried VO3. It's pretty impressive. It's all these models sometimes take multiple generations to get the right kind of right cuts. If you have some video editing experience, you can do some pretty cool things with it. But,
I mean, if those are the videos that have been generated, which I don't know if they are, those are sick, dude, compared to VO3. But
yeah, I mean, I've seen some really good VO3 things, though. I think, again, the prompt matters, how you prompt it, the types of information you give it definitely improves the results, right? Prompt engineering is still a thing. You still have to have some, otherwise, if you don't control, the direction a little bit, then you don't know what you're going to get. But you can see there's some pretty cool videos in here.
Yeah, like that's tight. But the VO3 videos compared to this, like they feel like they all have the same kind of camera lens. You understand what I'm saying? Like it looks like it's like the same camera that's like taking all the videos, but this one you can see has like different type of lighting. It's interesting.
I do wonder though, like I just remember I used to do a bunch of I guess image generation with Stable Diffusion, and if you could specify in the prompt like what type of camera it was taken with, and that would actually impact it. So I do wonder if you spent more time with the prompt engineering part, if you could get I have seen some different camera styles with VO3, and I imagine I bet you the prompts are pretty interesting. I guess this one you can it tells you the prompt, so that's kind of nice.
Oh, that's dope.
So it's not too complicated of a prompt, but you don't know how many times they had to run this generation to get something that was good, right? They could have ran it. Maybe that was the first shot, or maybe they did it 100 times and picked one that was good. And so you can see the prompts get a little bit longer, but still pretty sick. That's pretty cool.
Super impressive. Like it's only a matter of time, because I remember VO3 is like 2 weeks old, 3 weeks old now, maybe a month. I don't know. I forget now. We covered it on the show, but there's like this inflection point when those videos get generated and then go on my Instagram stream or my thread or whatever that thing is. You see all these, and I know it's VO3 given the camera and everything. I saw some funny ones where like it's like Robin from Batman and Robin. He's in like the Batcave. He just took a number 2 and he's like, hey, don't go in there. Like that type of stuff. It's just like very playful. But like if it hits your Instagram feed, it seems like it's like now mainstream, like because the Ghibli stuff from OpenAI, like it's just hitting people's non-technical people's streams or in Instagram, And then there are people are saying like, oh, I generated this with Copilot from Microsoft. So like, and then there's a bunch of ads now that are being shown. Hey, if you want to turn yourself into anime, use Copilot, right? So it's like,
Yeah.
I guess we're all so early.
Yeah. Yeah. It is impressive though, that the tools that if you are, it's kind of like if you are creative and you maybe don't have the budget to actually go out and hire a film crew, you can actually build some pretty cool things, right?
Yeah.
I think you'll see it and you've already seen there was a full commercial, built with VO3. It's like it's going to really reduce the production budgets for people. So I do think that like these kind of tools are going to be pretty amazing if you're like an indie creator and you want to create some, some kind of either short film or, commercials or there's a lot of power in your hands now.
Yeah. I want to see like, I think I'm actually thinking that this Seed Dance is going to be better. We'd love to see like a music video from like an artist that just is purely AI generated like this.
Yeah, you could probably, that's actually a good use case. Yeah, just AI generated for all the parts of the video, but it's, your music on top of it. Yeah. So yeah, there's another thing, Seed Dance. Check it out. Curious if anyone has tried it. If not, let us know where you, what you are creating. I don't know. I don't even know how to try it, but I will, I might do some. I might try to do some comparison. Yeah.
Yeah. If we find out how, we'll do it on stream.
Yeah. Yeah. Maybe if we have some time, maybe we'll just throw some generations at it and see if we can get something to actually use it. And again, maybe it's not fully available yet, but we'll figure that out. All right. And we were supposed to have a guest. They had kind of a emergency customer issue that they were working on, or customer deployment that came up. So we're going to move right into talking a little bit about multi-agent systems, because I think this is kind of a pretty good discussion that we can spend a lot of time on.
Yeah. A couple things from the chat here. I don't know what language that is, but what's up? Are you guys backed by YC? Yes, we were in YC Winter 25. And we were the first batch to come back and have demo day. So at the Palace of the Fine Arts.
Yeah.
Then Mr. Frank, really like these vibe streams. That's a nice way. And then he said, coding now, and it's like AI Bob Ross. Thanks, Mr. Frank, for being here.
Yeah.
So multi-agent, shall we?
Yeah. So there are probably two articles that we can read through, because they have somewhat differing opinions. It's like to multi-agent or to not multi-agent. It's like to be or not to be. That is the question.
And because of who these authors are, Twitter went wild. Just drama, as always. People taking stances. So which one should we start with?
Yeah, I mean, I think the cognition one came out first, right?
Yeah, so that's the one that started the drama,
Yes. So, it'll be interesting. Just listen to the titles, right? The first one, don't build multi-agents. All right. We're eventually going to listen to one that says how we built our multi-agent research system from Anthropic, but we'll start with cognition. So anything we should highlight around this article?
Yeah, so I read this when it came out, and I think first it's okay. So cognition are the people behind Devin. So you have to take this from the perspective of a coding agent, and a couple just core principles that they were talking about is they believe in what's something called context engineering, which makes sense because all we're doing is feeding context into our LLMs. And so if you're thinking of everything based on context, then there's a couple of I think there's a couple of principles, but one is for an AI coding agent that they need the full conversation history and any tools that have been executed before, not just individual messages. I think that I kind of agree with that, for sure. And then the problem is that if you're using multiple agents in parallel, the context gets muddied because a lot of things are happening in parallel, but you need the full picture to actually accomplish tasks. So the funny thing, though, if you scroll down a little bit, their diagram here is like a multi-agent that is unreliable in what they say unreliable because the task comes in and it breaks it into parallel tasks that then have to then join back together back to the agent to do the next thing. And I guess that's kind of setting this up as like not necessarily true because you don't have to do parallel tasks, right? You could just do them sequentially, which is actually what they are suggesting you do. So yeah, this is just them saying like the subtasks are being worked on and stuff like that.
Yeah.
um
And so I think, yeah, the second iteration is okay, well, at least the subtasks have the context from the previous
mhm.
task. So before it was just they're completely individual, breaks down, they don't have all the context. Here they're saying, well, you could pass in the context so of what actions have been taken so far,
Yeah,
but then eventually they end up with this.
yeah, which is still a multi-agent system if you think about it. But maybe the execution is sequential, or you know, once one agent is done, then the next one begins. I don't know. I disagree with this whole article, but
Yeah. And because again, they don't really tell us is it's the same agent just doing all the subtasks, because I
yeah,
think that you could easily make the argument, well, in what we've seen is often you get better results from a smaller specialized agent that just does
correct.
one task well. So if you do know that this type of task is needed, well, you just call that agent. And I do get, if you can make it, you don't have to be, it doesn't have to be parallel. If you can make it sequential and you can say this step, then this step, and this step happens, of course that's going to be more reliable. If
Yeah,
you always know the ordering of the steps, well, then I think that is, yeah, you should make it in that way. And maybe you don't need the parallel, nature of it, and you don't need to worry about combining the results necessarily because you can, do it more sequentially. But I
yeah,
do think that you could have, you could still have multi-agent systems that follow the same flow.
yeah. When we first built our agent network, it worked just like this, except there was no context being sent. So, like 100%, the problem exists, like where the agents are essentially acting independently in the task execution. But what we kind of discovered, and I'm sure the next article also discovered, is you need like a working memory set for the task at hand. So there's like a memory object that is constantly being written and read from on every level of the task, whether that's other agents' contribution to that memory or not. Like it's just a whole object that just tells you what the state of the execution is. And if you have that, then you can actually do anything because any agent in parallel or not can start reading and writing from this memory. And I'm curious why then they don't have any concept of memory here. It's just context, which is memory itself. But you know, um, but they're also right here where let's say you're doing like 100-step execution, then you will need to compress memories. You will need to like manage context. So like they're totally right in like context engineering being very important.
Yeah. And even with these larger context models, there may be, not saying there always is, there may be benefits for you controlling what gets in that context rather than just allowing the LLM. Even if you can fit it all in context, that might not always be the best case. So this is where you should, of course, test these theories on these longer, larger contexts. But there may be benefits for you to control how the memories get compressed rather than just allowing the LLM to
Yeah.
search for it, both for like cost reasons, performance reasons, quality reasons. But your mileage is going to vary
Yeah.
depending on what kind of tasks you're throwing at it, I imagine.
Yeah. In cognition's defense, from my first thing is like most people don't need wild networks to accomplish a task, right? So, if your architecture looks like this, that's totally fine. You don't necessarily need to have a big distributed workflow or agents or anything like that. But some people I think our natural architecture in our heads is gravitating towards that because we've learned don't repeat yourself, single responsibility, all this stuff from like our classic training is leading us here, but maybe you actually don't need it. Like monoliths are cool, right? If it works for you.
Yeah. It's funny. So I know we got to go into this other article, but I did see a tweet, and it was just, it was a clickbaity tweet. They wanted to inspire some contention, but they basically said, stop calling agents or stop calling workflows agents. And I think that, even Sam had a talk on, agents or workflows. Why not both? So this seems like a workflow, as well as an agent, right? It's like a combination of the two things. It's a workflow that calls into an agent in multiple steps. I think you end up like weaving these things together quite a bit, where, when you're building an agentic system, yes, you may use more deterministic workflows, and you may call out to an LLM that has some access to tools, and you can call that an agent, and you're going to kind of weave these things together, kind of like Lego blocks or components that you piece together in your system. But when you can the simpler you can keep it, the better. So the more deterministic you can make it, the better. So don't use a multi-agent system if you don't have to, but there might be use cases where it does make sense.
Yeah. We have a comment here from Adi Singh. If the agents are working in parallel, is there further room for error in updating the memory object as opposed to sequential tasks? 100%, right? If you're definitely working in parallel and you don't have any write locks, then you will definitely overwrite a previous agent's share of the memory. The way we designed it, at least, is like the memory is like per resource within the execution. So it's only responsible for updating its piece. But if it's something running in parallel, you have to take a lock before you write to memory. And then once the lock is free, then you can. So there's going to be congestion. So just because, like all this is it's the same distributed systems problems, but in AI. So anything you need to solve those will be applicable here, or just do it sequentially if you can.
Yeah. But of course, sequentially leads to maybe slower execution. There's all these trade-offs, right? But I would say, especially with, these LLMs being not always deterministic, right? Like unreliable, you should probably err on the side of reliability first. Like, care about quality and, more so than performance at the beginning stages. And then maybe you figure out performance or improve that in other ways. Because models are getting faster, they're getting cheaper. Like all these things are starting to become more true. So I think the quality is still the thing that people end up struggling with the most.
Yeah.
All right. So let's also then look at this other article. So this one's from Anthropic, how we built our multi-agent research system. So in this case, they're talking about the benefits of a multi-agent system. And again, you got to keep in mind that Cognition is building a coding agent, and this is a research agent. So they're accomplishing different tasks.
Yeah.
So you may not, one size does not fit all depending on what kind of agent or what kind of system you're actually building.
Some I would argue, though, if you're like a coding agent in a code base, half of your job is a research agent, right? Because you're doing all these open-ended queries on files, etc. And then there's the writing agent that actually synthesizes and then does the response, right? So obviously I'm biased because I like this article more.
Yeah. I would agree. But they do have some, I believe they have some diagrams here of their architecture for how so this is how they built into Claude the advanced research within Claude. And so, Claude chat, someone says, what's on your mind tonight? User request comes in, or says, what are all companies in the United States working on AI agents in 2025? Make a list. You can read the prompt there. So there's a request that comes in. So they're using like an orchestrator system, or some often called like a supervisor agent that can then call out has different tools and can call out to different sub-agents. So there's a citation sub-agent. There's a search sub-agent. Looks like maybe multiple, search sub-agents get called.
In parallel.
In parallel, looks like, And then they have, memory, which is probably you're written to throughout this process. And then eventually, I'm assuming this lead agent kind of comes back with the final report, right? It's responsible for putting it all together.
Even Anthropic has agent networks, man.
Yeah, I mean, this is a pretty typical agent network. So, we've been obviously building out our agent network primitive in Mastra, and you almost always end up with something like this, right? It's
Yeah.
you almost that having the supervisor agent does seem to help as someone that's directly responsible for what the final result, right?
Yeah. So I guess it's like, who do you trust more, Devin or Anthropic? That's really what it
Yeah.
comes down to.
Yeah.
Because like when the Devin article came out, all of Twitter was like, "Oh yeah, everyone." Like I think I saw some tweet like, "Oh, any AI infra company is about to lose their funding because it doesn't matter." Blah 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 blah. Right. But like that's so. I mean, and if you actually read the article, they're using multi agents too, or whatever. So I don't know. Things get polarizing so quickly in this kind of community that we're in.
Yeah. Well, everyone is looking for the next, viral moment that captures attention. And so if you say something that's a little bit more bold or out there, you can capture that attention. I think they did a good job doing that, right?
They did a great job.
So,
but they didn't anticipate Anthropic coming 3 days later and being like,
with
screw you guys. This is how we do it.
yeah, exactly. Like, no, actually, we do use a multi-agent system, and here's the architecture, which is almost the exact architecture that cognition says you shouldn't do.
Yeah.
If you think about it, I mean, it's a little different. Theirs is more sequential, where
Yeah.
theirs is much more, just like circular, right? But it's the same thing. This lead agent calls sub agents, looks like in parallel. It processes the response and sends the final output, which is basically what this is, right? Agent breaks down the task and then combines the result, gives her. So it says this is unreliable, but yeah. Again, it does maybe depend. Maybe this is a purely research task where a coding agent is not just doing research, it's also doing, writing code and needing to store different things. So, again, there's some nuance to all of this. I don't even think they're necessarily 100% in disagreement on if you actually read the articles, but they of course have differing opinions on certain points.
Yeah. And then our users are going to ask us which is better, and then we're going to have to be like, it depends, because it always does, and that's not the answer that they want to hear ever. So they're making our jobs harder.
Yeah, and so when you're looking at it from Mastra's point of view, we have 3 primitives, and it's always hard to tell people when you should choose which one, right? You have on the most deterministic side workflows, then you have agents, and then you have agent network or multi-agent systems, right? And the typical thing we normally say is, if you really don't know, start in the middle, build an agent, give it some tools. If you're not getting good enough results, you can go more deterministic with workflows. Or if you need more, creativity, or you need to build more complexity, maybe you start to move towards instituting some kind of agent network into the mix. But it does vary. It varies a lot depending on what you're actually trying to accomplish.
I feel for the user too, because having multiple ways to solve a problem is annoying because you just want to do what's right so you can just get your job done, right? A lot of people aren't building like AIs. They're building AI agents, but they're not building like whole software stacks for AI. They just want to get their job done, and the best way to do it,
Yeah. I mean, a lot of people are just building small AI features. We say small, but, relatively simple, which doesn't mean it's easy, but simple AI features into SaaS applications.
Yeah.
And in that case, like very often a workflow is sufficient. Just build a workflow. Honestly, like sometimes you don't even need a framework. A simple LLM call can do.
Yeah.
But once you get a little bit more complexity, having a system that helps you with debugging and tracing and eventually evals when you get there, observability, that can be helpful. So as you kind of get more complexity, that's where I think just moving towards workflows could be helpful. So if you're building something simple, like you don't need to be fancy, just use a workflow, it works.
That's what I would recommend too. It's because once again, we're in this like hype cycle, right? That if a problem can be solved with AI, people want to solve it. But if you could actually solve it without, it's cheaper. You don't have to pay tokens or anything, and you just do what you've been doing.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. So anything else that we're going to talk about on multi-agent systems? Otherwise, we have a few more we can do some more AI news. We got a few more AI news items we can chat through.
Just one other thing, like OpenAI's agent SDK is multi-agent capable as well. So it's not like this is a real problem space in our community. It's just the interesting thing was the contradiction, right? So
yeah. And I mean, for those of you that have been following this for a while, you might have seen, years ago, probably 2 years ago or whatever, when Crew AI first came out, right?
Mhm.
And the idea was, and honestly, at that time, it kind of sucked, right? Because the models weren't very good. And so trying to build multi-agent systems with, they call them crews or whatever, like the reliability was pretty bad. And so they introduced flows to try to make more deterministic pieces. But now as models get better and better, not everything can be a multi-agent system, but more and more use cases start to become more possible, right? It's not saying it's always going to be perfect, but as each model change comes in, you can do a little bit more with these kind of systems that you couldn't do before. And so you can kind of unlock more use cases. And so I think we're still have a long ways to go, but there's a lot more that you can actually pull off today than you could, a year or two ago.
Yeah.
All right. So let's talk about something else that's just kind of cool that I missed during the news. But VS Code, maybe VS Code is the new best editor again.
Oh, snap.
So VS Code seems to be the first editor, ahead of Cursor and Windsurf, to fully support the MCP spec. So most MCP clients, Cursor and Windsurf being two of the popular MCP clients, Claude Desktop is one as well, but most don't support the full spec. Most really just support tools. And so most MCP servers are just a collection of tools. But, and last week we actually had a workshop where we talked about building an MCP server. We talked about prompts, which is a part of the spec. We talked about resources, which is a part of the spec. And now, there's the spec is of course changing. It's not set in stone. There's more drafts. There's authentication maybe coming to the spec. That's in draft status. There's more things that I'm probably not even aware of. But as of now, it seems like VS Code now fully supports the spec.
Yeah, but who gives a shit? You know what I mean? If everyone's just using tools and all the MCP servers are just tools, it's not like all the MCP servers are implementing the full spec. Why does this fucking matter? That's what I think.
Well, I think it matters because once you get prompts are pretty cool, right? So you can kind of have prompts that can come in. And if your editor now supports autocomplete, which is kind of what prompts allow you to do, you could basically start typing and then there's suggested prompts. You can almost autocomplete your prompts in your chat interface. And if you don't know, like users, you might not know what's possible through some of these MCP servers. So if you can autocomplete prompts that help you along the way, then I think it just gives you that visual indication that, okay, this is what it can do. I can click on it and just run this prompt rather than having to type the prompt myself. So, but the MCP server is never going to implement it if no clients support it. So I think you have to have the clients support it first. Eventually MCP servers will catch up. It'll be a while, right? Like all this stuff moves pretty slowly. Yeah. But if you don't have the clients supporting it, why would any MCP server ever implement it?
That's true. That's true. And maybe that's the reason why we haven't seen much proliferation in those parts of the spec, because most people's clients are like Claude Desktop, Windsurf, Cursor, etc.
And then
OpenAI is going to do MCP. I wonder if they do the whole spec too.
Yeah, we're going to find out. Yeah, does ChatGPT support the full spec? Does it just support tool calling or tools from MCP? And resources is like, I still don't fully understand everything about what resources are with the spec, but it is cool in that, before you could kind of get around it by just having the tool return the context, but now the client can just know some of the resource, like the context. So in the case of, like if your MCP has access to information, maybe it's user specific information, you can just return that as resources. So the MCP client just knows about whatever user data you need rather than having to call a tool to get the data. Yeah. So it's just I don't know how well it will work yet. Like I think there's some risk with clients implementing the specs or reading the specs slightly differently. Like, how do they use those resources? Every agent's going to be different.
Yeah.
But it is, I do think it allows you to kind of like pass more information into the code agent a little easier.
Yeah. And also MCP is so new. Like, what, like 7 months old now? 8 months or something? And then in the prime spotlight for like 4 months, like right now. So
yeah, I do. Yeah, go ahead.
One last cool thing. If you're using Windsurf for Cursor, it's based on VS Code. So it's not like you can't go back and like it's going to be a completely different experience. It might be though for a lot of things, but maybe for this it'll be super chill.
Yeah, and I imagine Cursor and Windsurf got to be right behind, right?
Yeah.
They're not going to let VS Code like own the limelight too long. Like they have a lot of users paying them a lot of money, so
Yeah.
they're going to eventually add support. Some of these MCP servers will get updated. But I am curious, if you are watching this, how many people are actually using MCP servers in their editor? Because I bet it's still a pretty small percentage. Like, we're in this hype cycle echo chamber where MCP is everything, but how many are you actually using? Abby, if you go into Windsurf, how many MCP servers?
I just have one, which is the Mastra doc server.
I have 3 Mastra docs and then 2 others that I was building for fun. So
Yeah.
that's it. Like, I think that it is, again, there's a lot of hype around it. I think the hype is warranted, because I do think you can do a lot of cool things with it. But I don't know if like a lot of people outside of developers are using MCP yet. Maybe some people are using with Claude Desktop. Maybe now with ChatGPT supporting it, MCPs start to become even more interesting because ChatGPT is obviously a big consumer application. So we will see.
But in our actual agent applications, we do use MCP for things. So it's not like we don't, like Slack or like all these things off the shelf that are you don't want to write yourself. That's where I see like the most value right now.
Yeah. If you're building an agent, maybe less so in just the clients that you're using every day. But if you're building an agent, it does make things a lot easier.
Oh, we got two people who told us what's in their MCP. Except I need to. There it is.
Yeah, I think we were both turning it on at the same time.
Oh, okay. Paul Bunker, thank you for that comment. Mastra and 1 for accessing files on machine. That's dope. And then this dude Amr, only context 7 for getting docs, which we've heard about that before. So
context 7, for those that don't know, is a pretty cool way to get access to a whole bunch of documentation, developer documentation, really easily. So you can turn on context 7, you can get access to Tailwind, or someone has added the Mastra docs to it. I don't know who, but there's a whole bunch of different developer tools where it has access to those docs. It basically makes your editor a little bit more of an expert on all these different tools, because of course these LLMs don't have the most up-to-date data or content for all these documentation. So it is helpful. I've seen, I do think that the last time I use it, sometimes it struggled with searching and finding stuff. I mean, but even our MCP doc server isn't perfect. Yeah. So I think, everyone's searching is not an easy problem, right? Search is still a complicated problem, and how you actually search that depends a little bit on how what the prompt is, all that stuff. But it is a pretty cool tool. All right. So we have a few minutes till we go into security corner. Abby, tell the people. The people want to know. So you're doing some traveling. Let's spend a few minutes. Let's talk about all the things that that we did, or I say you did. I just watched from the sidelines, and some of you all maybe did as well. But what were you doing? And who are you with?
Nice. So the trip started, almost like a month ago. Tony from Mastra, me, and Ashwin, who's also on our team, we flew to Japan for 2 special events. The first event was a meetup at the Layer X. There's a company called Layer X. They had a big meetup. Over 200 people were there. And I have a bunch of stories along the way. So I'll try to be quick. Then we went to a CTO gathering of essentially Japan's top companies. Everyone there had revenues in the 100 millions, they're big. And they're like, I met these two guys. They were like asking me all these questions, and I was like, dude, how big is your company? They're like, oh, it's about like 500 people. And I was like, why are you asking me questions, dude? Our company is like way less than that. But it was a really cool experience. We also met with the NRI, which is Nomura Research Institute. They're one of the biggest companies and billion-dollar companies in Japan, and they really wanted to know like how they could use Mastra for client projects to do, because they do a lot of consulting. They're a big company like that. Consulting is a big deal in Japan, as we've learned. So we met with all those people. I dipped, and everyone went back home except for me. I flew to Belgium, and I took a train to another Mastra's house, Ward Peters, and we co-worked for a couple days. If you guys saw the A video and us working on the horses and goats in the backyard, that happened. We did a bunch of streams as well while we were hanging in Belgium. Then my little brother Nick came to meet us in Belgium. So we met up. We went to a small village next to Ward's place because, no offense, Ward, but your town is small and boring. And there's like a city right next to it that is small but not boring. So we did that. And Ward came over because it's only like a 20-minute car ride for him. Then we hung out again, co-worked some more. Also went to France to see Marvin from our team. He lives in Strasbourg. Y'all, if you were watching the EU streams, we did streams there as well. And then all of this kind of culminated in a wedding that we had to go to for Tony, who's a part of our team as well. So first, there's two weddings. So first wedding was in Greece. So we flew there. Wasn't any work happening there. I did record a walking video in Greece, and I'll release it later. The topic is like, I'm going to show you something that AI can't do, which is get married. So like I have a whole video for the wedding and stuff. And then we flew to Helsinki, Finland, which that place is wild because the sun doesn't go down to like 12:30 a.m. and it comes up at 3 a.m. So me and my brother, we were screwed. Our sleep schedules were terrible. Just couldn't get any sleep because there's just sunlight all the time. There was another wedding there, which I officiated. I hope I did a good job. And then came back home. So that was the whole trip. Very Mastra focused, though. Meeting all the teammates. It was definitely a lot of fun. Can't say it wasn't. So yeah.
But I imagine you are glad to be back in San Francisco.
Dude, yeah, at the end of it, I was just so ready to go home because I hadn't slept in my own bed for a while. And I kind of, I miss my co-founders a lot. I know it's kind of cheesy to say that, but I truly did, because we usually see each other way often than, I was gone for like almost 5 weeks. So we see each other once a month.
Yeah, and time zones are tough too, and there's not a lot of overlap. But I will be on your doorstep in about, I don't know, 20 hours. So
yeah,
I will be there soon.
Also, for the viewers, Shane and I have this little tradition that we're not going to be able to do tomorrow, where I pick him up from the airport, and there's a probability if I'm going to give him a hug or not, something like that. But I don't have my car because I flew directly to San Francisco, and I actually left from LA. So we won't get to do the tradition tomorrow, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's fine. I'll forgive you this time, but it has been like 6 weeks, so
my bad.
we will see each other soon. Yeah. And this week's going to be fun. I'll be speaking at an event, an AI meetup at the Elastic office, where I'll be talking about building a personal assistant agent with Mastra. So that's tomorrow. And then on Wednesday, I'll be doing a short demo at AI Tinkerers, which is also in San Francisco, talking about how we built the MCP course for Mastra. So it's going to be a busy week. We're going to have a lot of fun.
Yep. And we're planning the future of Mastra. So
yeah,
as we always do.
Some more road mapping. But we do have a special guest. It's been a little while since we've done a security corner. So let's bring on Allie. Allie, what's up?
Nothing much. What's going on?
Just thriving and surviving.
Yeah, can relate for sure. But excited to do another security corner.
Yeah. So today, and I'm going to be honest, I didn't read this full article, but I did have GPT-4o summarize it for me. And then I read the summary. So we are going to talk about, it's actually a paper, and it was posted on Simon Willison's blog. So I'll just share my screen. We'll talk a little bit about this, and we'll just, spend a few minutes chatting. But it's called Design Patterns for Securing LLM Agents Against Prompt Injections. So it talks a little bit about the scope of the problem. As long as agents and their defenses rely on a current class of language models, it's unlikely that general purpose agents can provide meaningful and reliable safety guarantees. That's a pretty bold problem. I think a lot of people would probably, if you really think about it, it makes sense though, right? So what kinds of agents can we build today that produce useful work while offering resistance to prompt injection attacks? So they talk about different patterns. And so there's, I think, 6 different patterns that they talk through here. And yeah, I'm going to try to just pull up the quick summary so we can talk through it. Any first high level thoughts before I give the high level of all the 6 different patterns?
Yeah, for sure. I had some high level thoughts reading this, and just like you, I read this like not long before doing this. I didn't fully read the full paper itself that they linked to, but I did read most of this article. My one largest takeaway I think from it was that the risk is never zero. You can do everything. You can try to have an LM guardrails in place or an AI security runtime product or implement one of these design patterns, but not any one of those methods in and of themselves is fully foolproof, which reminds me a lot of cloud security and how, that's sort of a shared responsibility model. And, simply turning on precautions with your cloud provider, that's not a foolproof, model of app security for your application. It's much, much larger than that. And I think that's sort of the theme here with AI agents. And that's my biggest takeaway.
Yeah. All right, so let's talk really quickly on the 6 different patterns. I don't know that I'm even going to fully understand them by just reading them, but we will do our best to decipher them as best we can. So the first one is called the agent selector pattern. So essentially, the agent can call tools, but doesn't see their results. So it's more like an LLM-driven switch that prevents the tool output from changing the LLM's decision. And this one is interesting to me because I know I talked about it last week, I talked about it a lot, but we built this course using an MCP server. And the whole idea around what the course does today is just a bunch of tools, but it tries to get the code agent to think it's an instructor. So we are literally using the tool output to kind of change the agent. In this case, if it's Cursor or Windsurf, to treat it more like it's instructing you rather than doing its normal job, which is to write code for you. So we are literally, in some ways, kind of like prompt injecting back to the editor in order to actually get it to treat itself like an instructor. So it's trying to teach you the content, and it can help you write the code, of course, but it changes the mindset of the agent a little bit. So we are essentially using prompt injection to do this. So if you didn't have access to the tool results, of course, you couldn't change the way that the agent works.
Or if they guardrail us and say you can't tell your agents you're an instructor, then we're screwed. But
it's why we call the course experimental, because it's definitely not the intended use, but it does work relatively well depending on the model that you select. And certain, Cursor works pretty well. Windsurf is a little bit more verbose, but it still kind of works. But yeah, we're basically trying to in some ways hack the agent to become an instructor for you instead of just being a coding assistant. All right, so the next pattern is plan, then execute. So essentially, the agent first plans a set of tool actions without seeing the tool output, and then it executes. So it separates the plan making from the execution. So at minimum, malicious instructions in the output can't influence the behavior.
This one sounded like an LLM workflow to me. I don't know if that sounded what it sounds like to you as well.
Yeah, very much so.
Yeah, well, it's almost like the LLM, like the first step is make the plan, and then it's like, okay, so then after you make the plan, you can execute the tool calls, but instead of just allowing you to, making the plan as you go and feeding the results back in. All right, so then third one is the LLM map reduce pattern. So basically apply the LLM over chunks of untrusted text independently, then aggregate safe summaries. So it's useful for large input and helps prevent cross-contamination.
This one made sense to me up until the aggregation part. 'Cause, like, what decides if it's safe or not? Like, where's the LLM as a judge, I guess, in that workflow to decide that, the one agent that did go over one malicious file, that was malicious or not?
Yeah, you're going to need a judge.
And it does say involves sub-agents, so maybe the judge is part of that, or maybe there's like sub-agents that help judge files that were judged relevant or then aggregated and sent. So there must be some kind of sub-agent that does sub-agent that responds with the Boolean indicating whether the file is relevant or not. So yeah, it's like a distributed pattern for, like analyzing large chunks of text and determining if it's safe. But yeah, it seems like it'd be a little complexity to implement, but
there's a lot, because like you have to, like if you're doing a stream, you can't just stream all the text, right? You have to collect the text in chunks, see if it's okay, then allow the stream to happen. It's kind of annoying actually, but it's secure, I guess.
Yeah, does that impact latency?
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
There's a lot of stream text is like one word. The, from the where, you got to wait till that. So you're adding, I think all of this adds latency, every single one probably. So, but that's okay, to be secure. So,
I mean, it is and it isn't. Like, it's got to be a usable product for sure. Like, I think when I was reviewing a lot of like AI security runtime products back for a paper I wrote in January, February timeline, a lot of the things that we looked into was like latency. And if it, introduced a bunch of latency to the product, then if it did, then, they didn't want to use it. There's an article out there by Dropbox that they were evaluating a product like that. And they listed out their top 3 requirements as an engineering team. And latency was one of those 3.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it varies. There are certainly some applications that can be more latency sensitive, right? If you kick off a deep research task in ChatGPT, for instance, it's going to take a while. So if it added a little extra latency, in the grand scheme of things, it's probably not noticeable. But if it's a autocomplete for a code editor, you can't add extra latency there, right? You need the autocomplete to be snappy and fast. And so I think it definitely, there's a spectrum for sure.
Yeah.
That's a great point. I think it's true like for voice agents also. Like it's super weird to be on a phone call and then have like a bunch of like lag, and then it's like, okay, maybe this isn't a real person or this is kind of strange.
Yeah. I mean, voice agents are probably the most latency sensitive application.
Yeah.
It's like,
but I doubt they're doing prompt injection patterns at all.
Yeah, I think, yeah.
I'll put a bet on it.
I think you could probably, I bet if you tried, you could probably prompt inject any voice agent that's out there because they're so latency sensitive. I mean, we have people that are building voice agents or voice agent type capabilities in Mastra, and they're comparing like detailed latency metrics for every model, right? Because the results of the actual content the model produces is important, but maybe more important is like, even if one is 80% as good, but twice as fast, like you would take that because the latency is so important. And so I imagine that a lot of them don't have the extra latency time to be able to try to add security right now.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think that was like one takeaway of mine also from this article. I think at the top, they said there's no magic fix for prompt injection as is, even though I know a lot of like runtime security vendors kind of claim that they are that. I'm not sure if AI runtime security is the solution or, these these workflows or these patterns are, or like probably a combination of the two.
Yeah.
But one of the most notable voice agents, the Vader NPC in Fortnite, that started off really bad with like a lot of like inappropriate output and stuff, and falling victim to a bunch of different prompt injections. And then it suddenly like it was able to be fixed, or wasn't doing that anymore. So like clearly there is some sort of solution out there, like it's possible.
Totally.
Yeah. Security, I think, is always a layered approach, right? Like there's always multiple steps. It's not necessarily just one thing. All right. So the fourth pattern, the dual LLM pattern. So this one says like a quarantined LLM processes untrusted input. Its sanitized output becomes an opaque reference for a privileged LLM, and this shield prevents malicious tokens from ever reaching sensitive logic. I don't know what that necessarily means.
The quarantined, so this is the dual LLM approach is how most guardrail systems work, where like the guardrail itself is an agent or an LLM that is a smaller model that can judge the output. So essentially the request goes to both LLMs and they both start executing. So you still need a good execution environment, right? You can't like not have that. But like the guardrail LLM or this quarantined LLM is going to like essentially judge if it can actually continue the operation or not, right? And if it can, then you didn't lose any latency because you already started the request with the LLM that's going to serve the response, right? And then if you do find some bullshit, you can tripwire, or you can just cancel the request. So it adds complexity for sure, but it's probably the right thing to do.
Yeah, and I think this is what a lot of the low latency guardrails applications are doing. Whether they block it and wait on the result, or whether they run it in parallel and then they wait for both to complete before they pass in the result.
Yeah,
but they're basically doing some version of this, right?
Yeah, honestly, none of these are like, this one's a great solution. I like this one a lot. Streaming is what fucks everything up, right? Like if you didn't have streaming, then no one would give a shit about all of this. These like different patterns. I mean, they wouldn't care that it causes latency or whatever, but because it's hard to fix a boat while it's freaking going, like exactly what a stream is, then it just gets harder to do.
Yeah, exactly. Streaming is always a pain. Every time it always comes back to streaming. All right, the fifth pattern, the code then execute pattern. So apparently this is discussed in the DeepMind's Camel paper, but the LLM emits structured executable code. So this could be, Python or TypeScript code or whatever, instead of direct text. So then the code is validated before execution. So it's reducing the chance of like hidden injections, and then the code's executed, right? So it's actually saying that, you have to write code as that's your response, and then you validate the code and then run the code. Okay, I guess that one makes sense to me.
Totally.
That one kind of reminded me of like Run Python, the MCP server that Pydantic created with Pyodide.
Yeah. It's funny. I think all of enterprise agents will have to run their LLM requests in a sandbox environment. And then you're going to have like a proxy in front of it for actual user interaction. I mean, I think when we were at that OWASP thing, Allie, I thought I saw architecture diagram kind of like that for like a sandbox execution. That's probably where we're all headed. So
yeah,
that sucks because it's such a pain in the ass to do, but it's important. So
yeah, we'll see if patterns improve there. Because it sounds like kind of like a Bastion, which like that's sort of an antiquated model, and we've got better improvements from that since then.
All right, the sixth, context minimization pattern. So this one is basically supply as little context as necessary to the LLM to minimize, because minimizing exposure shrinks the attack surface and limits potential instruction leakage. So even Simon Willison says, I'm slightly confused by this one. So, yeah. All right. So if a user's prompt is converted into an SQL query, which returns raw data, and that data is returned in a way that cannot possibly include any of the text from the original prompt, the chance of prompt injection could be eliminated. So again, I guess it's, in some ways, making sure that the context that gets passed into the LLM is minimized So it's getting as little context as possible that actually gets passed through.
Yeah, if you have like poisoned context too, then you would need to have some, and one, you have to get rid of it, right? But you also need to have like some safeguards on the inputs to your requests. Like your whole memory chain would need to have a filter on it, like throw out PII, throw out all this stuff that shouldn't be going in there.
Yeah, I know a lot of like ChatGPT wrappers that claim to remove like PII and then throw the I'm HIPAA compliant sticker on it because like OpenAI isn't like HIPAA compliant, to my knowledge.
Well, it's getting saved
Yeah.
somewhere.
Exactly.
Well, it's getting saved in a HIPAA compliant database. So, okay, then everything's chilled at that point.
Yeah, in theory.
And then so this paper then introduces 10 different case studies, which I'm actually pretty interested in this. I'll probably read through some of these because it's talking about how to use some of these design patterns, but they're also like practical examples of building agents, right? Like an operating system assistant, I guess, a SQL agent, email calendar assistant, customer service chatbot, booking assistant, product recommender. I mean, a whole bunch of actual practical agents. These are things that Mastra users are trying to build, right? I'm sure, if you're trying to build an agent, it might fall into some kind of category that's close to these things. I think it's nice to read case studies on how some decision making happens when building these types of agents. So definitely, if you're building something similar to one of these, it might be useful to read the paper. And unfortunately, they just give you the Python code, instead of the TypeScript code. But it is useful to see just actual practical code examples of how some of these things are getting built. All right. And there's some other stuff, closing thoughts and, actually a link to the actual paper to read, but definitely some interesting thoughts around prompt injections and how you might be able to use some of these patterns to help at least make your agent a little bit more secure. I don't think there's there's no silver bullet as we've discussed, but some of these things could help, coupled with maybe some of the security providers that are out there that help in different ways. So as we mentioned, kind of a layered approach. Probably there's not one thing that is going to save you, but a collection of these things might make it at least a little bit more secure.
For sure. Yeah, we call that defense in depth.
Yeah, I did look at the white paper, and I thought one of those use cases was like a medical diagnosis chatbot, which I thought it was interesting. And they use like context minimization, which made a lot of sense because whatever the user says, like they don't keep that in the memory of the interaction. What they do is they summarize the symptoms, get an actual diagnosis from their knowledge base. They do a RAG on a bunch of medical, maybe medical journals or I don't know, textbooks or some shit. And then they return that result to the doctor, right? Because it's the doctor that's using the bot to take all that stuff. So the doctor actually doesn't know what the user even said or anything. They just know based on the symptoms, what the diagnosis was. So it's pretty interesting. I would read the white paper for anyone who's interested in reading white papers.
Yeah, so you can see this one. I'm assuming you're looking at this one, medical diagnosis via an LLM intermediary.
Yeah, that was one I think.
But yeah, they'll definitely encourage you to, for those of you that do like reading white papers, or my preference is I will often take these white papers and just throw them into Notebook LM and have them generate a podcast for me, and then I will listen to that 10 to 15 minute podcast around the white paper and learn a lot without actually spending the time to read it all. Depending on if I'm need to be hands free or if I'm traveling or something, sometimes that's one hint that I like to do that helps me consume some of this information without actually reading all of it, because there's a lot of white papers coming out. It's hard to keep up with all the stuff, but that's why you tune into this. So maybe you can keep up in less time. All right. And yeah, we posted the PDF. So there's the actual PDF there. If you do want to get the white paper and read it yourself or drop it into Notebook LM or wherever you put your PDFs. And with that, anything else going on, Allie, that you want to talk about today?
No, nothing really top of mind.
All right. Well, we appreciate you coming on and chatting with us about some security things, and we'll see you again here in the near future, I imagine.
Awesome. Thanks,
Thank
Shane.
you.
Thanks, Abby.
See ya.
See you.
See ya.
And then it was, yeah,
That
and
was
then it was
good.
2, just you and me again.
That was my first security corner. That was
Yeah.
tight.
Yeah, we do all kinds of stuff. Sometimes we'll show code. We'll talk about various security related aspects. Security is important, especially as you get to actually productionizing an agent, right? It becomes more and more important, especially the larger of an organization you are, the more security you need, right? Just to feel confident in what you're actually deploying. And it's hard to feel confident in some of these AI systems right now. So I think it is important to talk about it consistently and to slowly figure out ways and tactics to improve the security of whatever we're building.
Yeah, and it's very frustrating too to the user because it depends is the answer to this one too. Like, how do I secure my agent? Well, it depends, you know?
Yeah. Not just one thing. All right. And with that, so we're going to talk through just some stuff that we are working on at Mastra. We do have then Mastra user that built something pretty cool that we're going to have on here hopefully pretty soon, maybe in 15 or so minutes. But we did want to talk about something that I think Ward was working on where we maybe wanted to show some code and show how it is actually possible. We had a question too. It came up on Twitter. It's come up from, a customer that's trying to use Mastra, where they basically said, we're using Supabase. We're kind of all in on Supabase, but we can't run Mastra on Supabase edge functions. So we thought about it and we're like, well, why not? You should be able to run Mastra, at least, some version of it in a Supabase edge function. And so we have a working example that does work. Abby, you want me to pull up the code?
I got it.
All right.
I got it. Can you? Let's also.
Yes, we can see it.
Oh, 1 second. Let me stop sharing. I'll share the link with everyone here.
Is it public?
Ooh, I forgot to check that.
I don't think it is yet.
It's public.
Oh, it is. It is. Okay. Yeah.
Cool. So let me share this. Okay, so we were talking to a couple customers who wanted Supabase Edge support, and you should want to do this because we should want to do this. That's why we're doing it. But Supabase Edge Functions runs on a platform called Dino, and Dino has 2 versions: Dino version 1 and Dino version 2. Duh. The thing is, I got to tell a story before we get into Dino, because we were at a company that spent a lot of time trying to get Dino working on their platform, and it took like many months to do so. And so when we entered the company, remember, Shane, like the nightmare that people were talking about. They're like, oh, after Dino, we're not taking chances on third-party software ever again, which screwed up our job and it pissed me off, right? So I don't have a very pleasant memory of Dino in my life. What about you?
Yeah, the same. Yeah, Dino had, I would just say, some reliability issues, and it seems like they've gotten better from what I've seen here, but this is a point. This is a few years ago. A few years ago, there were some issues, and it was incredibly frustrating. So yeah, I have a negative perception of Dino because of my past, as you probably do as well, Avi. But the people want what the people want, and
people want what they want,
and we will give them what they want. And they want Dino support because that's what Supabase Edge functions are running.
Yeah.
So we will figure out, how to make it work with Dino.
Yeah. So to get into what we did, so first of all, we had to go through all of Mastra. So Mastra itself was built for Node and designed to run both in a serverless Node environment or long-running processes, which, we believe that in AI world, you should probably use long-running processes if you can, just to reduce the friction that you may have when starting out. So Supabase Edge functions are on Dino 1, I believe. So what we did here is create an example. We're not necessarily going to make this like first party support yet until we have more users with that they expressing that they really need this, because then we'll just create a Dino deployer, right? So you can add that to your Mastra instance. It'll do the right thing when it builds and deploys, and all that will be good. What we wanted to show in this project is that you could essentially build a Mastra app, deploy it to a Supabase edge function, and then in a UI use our UI to like visualize workflows. And it was cool because to make something Dino compatible, you have to have a bundle Ruski on your team. And if y'all don't know what bundle Ruski means, is someone who knows how to bundle JavaScript very well. Because we have to support all types of runtimes, not just freaking Dino. So we had to take our node runtime and then do a bunch of transformation at the build time. If y'all don't know Dino, the imports are different. If you want to use a module from Node, you have to use like Node : It doesn't support process.env. Man, there's a whole bunch of shit that it doesn't support. So we had to go and make those changes, which is fine. We did it. So in this case, you're running the application within Supabase. So I'll show, this is like a normal Supabase folder that you can get. This just has all, if you like Supabase in it, you can get this. And in the functions directory, we'll have this Dino JSON. You can see these are like the these are like the mapping. So if you want to use like npm module, you have to do npm : etc. And right now we have like our like this is like a snapshot version of what we're building. So don't really pay attention to that, other than it's just a specific version of Mastra we're cooking to use here. And if you want to use, we use path-based imports, which is another thing you have to kind of like figure out. You can't just do this. I guess you could, but like we had to like map like what our path imports are to the Dino ones. So as I said, like npm : package name is kind of like the syntax there. Oh shit, what happened here? Where'd the CSS go on GitHub? There it is. So then Mastra uses Hono as its server. You can execute Hono anywhere, especially even in Dino. So we had to set up if you want to do this yourself, you'll need to set up your Hono server, and then you can add. One good thing we did in Mastra server, we have a package called Mastra server. What it allows you to do is if you don't want to use Hono, or you have to use Hono in a different context like this, you can import all of our base Mastra server handlers. These are not server specific, but they do all the server functionality that is in our Mastra server. So here, as you can see, you can set up your own Hono in a Supabase edge function, and then you can just call our handler and pass Mastra in. And then it'll give you the same functionality that same API handler is doing in the normal Mastra server. So if you want to build Express server, Koa, whatever, you can do so without, having to just use Mastra, the whole server. So that's what we did. So from this perspective, this was the easiest part, right? Just setting all this Hono stuff in Supabase. The hard part is actually in the core framework, and then we did all that. So I'll just show you. This is, as you can see, a typical Mastra project. As you can see, process has to go from node process. You have to inject some stuff. The workflows, so test workflow, all of the same stuff, but we made it Dino compatible internally in Mastra core, and we will release it soon. Should I look? That's pretty much it to show. If you want to play around with it, you could just use this as or copy this, or look at how it's done and then try it yourself. And I think this is just a UI that we showed that, you can get all of Mastra's. If you like Mastra UI and stuff, we export the playground UI, but we don't necessarily tell you how to build shit together. And that's fine, because that's not what we're trying to do right now. But if you're adventurous, like we are in this example, you can import Mastra playground components and then put them together just like they are in our playground. We get a lot of requests to do that as well. So this kind of shows like 2 ways of doing that. Other than that, happy hacking if you're really interested in this.
Yeah, and this is a pretty typical approach where we'll make an example and show you how you can do it, and if enough people ask for better support, we'll add more, right? We'll improve it and make it a first class deployer at some point.
Yeah.
But we like to show you what we're hacking away at, what the team is working on, because this honestly came from one of our users, one of our customers that wanted this, and so we're like, let's build it. And we heard a second person raise their hand on X around the same time that said they wanted it, so we'll build an example, and then if enough people like it, maybe we'll add more support and make it even easier.
Yeah.
So there is a question, and do you guys know of any good examples of STS? I'm assuming there's like speech to speech, maybe like real time speech, I would guess, and then front end to separate the Mastra back end.
Yeah. We don't have any good examples yet. That's because if you really want to do good STS, you're going to need to use WebRTC on your front end to then go to Mastra's backend. If you're using a Mastra backend, you can also use sorry, I was laughing because of Ward's comment. Sorry, Joseph.
Yes, and it has the developer who created this, one of them, great hair.
Yeah, great hair. Back to Joseph's thing. Oops, sorry. Go ahead, Shane. Yeah, we need to still work on this WebRTC to Mastra server connection. OpenAI real-time does have WebRTC support, and I would recommend doing WebRTC if you're like, depends on where your front end is, but if you have a WebRTC support, then that's where you should be doing. If you don't, you can do STS. We have WebSockets, and then you're in that game. That's probably easier to pull off right now on your own server if you're trying to use Mastra as the backend. We took a little break on voice because there's 1,000 other things to do, but we will return to the voice game one of these days, but not too long from now. So, also, Joseph, thanks for being here again. I think I remember you from a different stream like last week or something, or the previous week. So, welcome back.
Yeah. So with that, so we were originally going to have a guest come on and demo. He did send me a message and say his demo was broken. So we will have him on at another point. We do have here's another comment.
Oh yeah, we have a bug in the latest. It's actually in alpha now. Something was wrong with our stream encoding on the HTTP side. We pushed a fix for that this morning. It will go out into stable release tomorrow. So yeah, sorry about that. It was introduced in 0.10.2. We don't really know how or what changed yet. That's where the team is kind of investigating right now. Timely question though, because yeah, it should be fixed tomorrow. The streaming, for some reason, is just collecting all the tool calls and everything and then responding at the end. So not really streaming. You have to change your chunk type or your chunk encoding to chunk, or character encoding to chunk, one of those encodings. But if you have patience, it'll be fixed tomorrow.
Then Yosef said, thanks. Yep, thank you.
Yeah, no, thanks. And hopefully we can get some better support there too.
All right,
so
dude.
The dude's demo broke. That's what happened. Sorry, is that what happened?
Yeah, so yeah, hopefully the demo wasn't, trying to stream something.
Yeah.
I mean, answer the phone.
Dude, what if it was though?
I doubt it. But you should have answered that phone live on stream and said, "Hey, yo, I'm on a stream right now."
Dang.
From
Nina Petite, could you please check GitHub issue of RAG? I can't create RAG with the last Mastra version. Yeah, we're also aware of this. Should be we'll fix it in the release. Same thing I told the other dude. We're on it.
Yeah, tomorrow.
Yeah,
more improvements. Fixing a few regressions.
Yeah,
moving the ball forward. But yeah, tomorrow. tomorrow. Tuesday is always release day. For those of you that do not know, we try to release on Tuesdays every week. So there's always new things coming out, and we then highlight it later in the week when we do the changelog. Oh, Discord issue. Yeah. With that, yeah, anything else you want to chat about today? Otherwise, we could call the stream early. You know, we've been going an hour and a half. 90 minutes still a solid stream.
Yeah, 162 people in there. Hope everyone had a good time. But I think as the chat has told us, I think it's time for us to go fix some bugs.
Yeah, always more to do. Thank you all for tuning in. We've kind of been changing our streaming schedule up a little bit. So we're still going to do these AI Agents Hour live streams every week, typically on Mondays around noon Pacific time. The rest of the team is still going to be popping in, doing more actual live coding streams. So we decided to split up the guests and the news into one stream, and then the team will come on occasionally and do like coding live streams as well. So I think, you know, Tyler and Daniel are going to come on Friday and try to do on Fridays and do a live coding stream. So if you want to see live coding, we'll have some of those streams for you, but you'll know kind of going into it what you're watching, you know. And then if you want more news and guests and kind of like what's going on in the AI world, the AI agents industry, I guess, if you can call it an industry that's popping up, that's what the stream's for.
Yeah. Oh, we also forgot to say something. One of our guys, Marvin, who you all know from the stream, just had a baby. So if everyone can give him a congrats and well wishes and whatever positive energy always helps, because he's not going to be sleeping anytime soon. So
yeah, congrats, Marvin. Get some sleep.
Yeah,
good luck.
And
Ward, when Spotify, we're already on Spotify. We're a little out of date, but we're on Spotify right now. So if you want to watch it on Spotify,
yeah,
it's a little delay because there's a manual process, and the manual process is me being the bottleneck from stream to upload to Spotify. So we're a little behind, but old episodes will be slowly getting fed into Spotify. So if you'd rather watch this on Spotify and not watch it live, you can do so.
And we'll do EU streams as well. We just have to one dude has a baby and one guy has 3 goats. So we have to figure out, the right times and stuff. But
yeah,
if you miss them, they'll come back.
Yeah, and those will likely be, kind of the live coding flavor, right? So all let us know, definitely let us know if you like kind of splitting up these formats. Do you prefer seeing the news and having guests on talking about what they're building in AI and seeing demos? Do you like the coding live streams? But hopefully the splitting them up, you'll be able to know when you're jumping in. Are you in for some live coding, or are you going to in for some more news and guests and updates? Agreed, Amkar. Congrats.
Yeah.
And yes, please, Ward, yes, please subscribe to Spotify. And why aren't you just on the stream right now with us? What are you doing? What are you doing right now? Ward is feeding his goats. That's my guess.
Feeding his goats.
All right. Well, thank you all for tuning in. We'll be back again next week. We'll have some more live streams. We always, one other thing, we live stream on Thursdays. We do a workshop each week. So we try to live stream that. So that's a little bit more, there's a mix of coding in there and some education. So we do a live stream our workshops as well. So hello, I'm Jed. Thanks for joining us. We are just about to wrap up, but tune in next week. You can always check out all of our stuff on all of our past streams on YouTube. So go check out the Mastra YouTube. It's right there. Just Mastra-AI on YouTube. If you're not already, please follow Abby on X. It's Abby Iyer. Please follow me as well, SM Thomas 3. Thanks for tuning in to AI Agents Hour. We'll see you next week.
See ya. Peace.